charitable status and being registered as the organization was in October '93, and going on from there opened the doors for a number of properties, Grant Wilson wetlands and so on, where word got out, and Charlie Grant decided that he would not be able to develop the property under the current zoning bylaws and so on, that he would donate it, and that's, I thought it was a huge move and sort of set the whole organization up as having achieved something so early, because it was a fairly major piece, and there was some opposition to doing it. I guess saving a swamp, there's always that attitude that it was not good for anything anyway.
Right,
you know.
right.
So then followed through on that, but the next big one in my mind was the Cameron Ranch. Mm-hmm. It was huge. There was a lot of discussion going on, and the lady didn't want to sell, and the families were involved, and nobody knew really what was going to happen there, but eventually it fell into place with a number of donators, if you like, and but that was, I thought, a wonderful piece. You could go down and you could see the whole thing, and the cattle, and and it was a marvelous acquisition.
That was giant. That was a giant step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me it was. What amazes me is how much it has grown so quickly. That amazes me, and I think it all goes back to what Ken was hinting at. The PR, the gentle approach that guys like Ron Reed and subsequently Mark Bessett took to potential donors without offending the other people who cared very much about the land, but felt threatened by it, right? So lots of your hunters and fishermen and everybody else, if you didn't explain what you were about in a gentle way, they would could become your adversaries, but they didn't, because of that amazing PR that we built in the community, so that people felt comfortable working with the Couchiching Conservancy. And I've had a lot of politicians tell me that they love supporting the Conservancy because everybody they talk to is positive about it, and that doesn't happen, I'm sure, everywhere.
No.
Right?
No, absolutely.
A huge talent.
A lot of soft talk. I know when we had the office at Lake Dalrymple, and I worked in the office while Janet was out talking to all the landowners around and so on. Yeah. A lot of resistance to outsiders.
Right.
They were protecting everything from everybody, but Janet was, able to build up a rapport and a trust, and that has continued on, the trustworthiness. And
that was the big thing too, right from the get-go, as in our mission statement, which we spent so many months on, was in perpetuity, right? We wanted to create this organization in a way that it could outlast governments, it could outlast all of us, and it would be financially sound. That was the other thing. We were very big at the beginning about endowments for each property, setting up enough money set aside for each one, again, that it wouldn't be a burden to maintain them and protect them. And again, I think if you were unscrupulous and you just took every property that was offered to you, and you didn't have proper, endowments built up, that would be a huge mistake, and we recognize that from the get-go. Because there were properties we said no, we don't want them, for good reason. Not that they weren't lovely places, but it wasn't going to fit our mandate.
That it happened, period.
Yes,
the
I think so.
fact that it grew into a really strong, viable organization, I think certainly amazed us. Can you believe this is happening? Because we go to the meetings. I became less involved after the original organization, and we'd sort of look at each other. Oh my, you know, and we knew the people lots of times that were involved, but you didn't know that they would be interested, kind of stuff, until you get doing
talking to
stuff,
them,
you know. And, well, yeah, I mean, when we look around, there's all kinds of people we know that are really happy to help, happy to see it happening, and thinking, we never thought this, not, in 30 years is a long time, but it's not with what the progress has been.
It was, I think part of the deal was the fact that we got involved with different organizations and people around land issues. Scouts Valley, so you're involved with the city and educating the city and trying to get the organization that originally held those lands, because that's where they were going to build the
Gas line?
college
Oh.
at the time. And George and Bill and elsewhere, of course, I mean, the work that would have been involved, but it was a teacher thing. That was all the people in that teachers group who put a lot of money into actually buying Scouts Valley with the idea of building an education facility on that property. And it just never happened. Something always kept getting in the way, so that land was just sitting there.
And Ron, I can remember he wrote a column in the paper about driving up to Aurelia. He was coming home, and he thought, that green space is really valuable. It needs to be saved. So taking that aspect changed the whole dynamic of, even if it isn't going to be an educational facility, it could be even more important is just keeping the land
way
and
it
the
is.
green space.
Yeah.
It's still sort of an educational facility, but
sure
it's
it
a
is.
forest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, there was the other private, I mean, the Darkers, right at the very beginning, became very heavily involved. And those properties came on board around that time, and then little bits and pieces here. There's the piece of property that I think it was University of Toronto held out at Moonstone. There was they had been doing some archaeological digs on the property, but we became involved in that, so that was another aspect of the community that the land gave us access to. Yeah. We really had no idea how this was going to go. One of the biggest land trusts at the time was the Georgian Bay Land Trust, and we knew there was all sorts of money involved in that, and that, of course, it didn't scare us off, but at least we knew in order for them to be successful, they put a lot of money into it, and were able to put a lot of money into it. The Lower Grand came on board around the same time, and they got a huge donation, including buildings, a house and property down on the Lower Grand when that organization got formed, which was just a little ahead of the Conservancy around the same time. So, I mean, just having those connections, but the fact that somebody was able to, I don't know who actually wrote sorry.
I don't.
Strategic plan.
Well, the plan itself, I mean, that was magnificent. The fact they were able to gather together all of those maps and everything, but the fact that they could actually stack them all together and come up with a map that showed everything, all of the ANSIs and the various other pieces of property owned by the county, property owned by various municipalities, and then of course Nalawasaga Conservation running around the edge and those kinds of things.
Most of the talk around each of our meetings were putting all these things together, because we would be out looking, somebody would go here to look for this, and so because the Naturalist Club was fairly well established by then, and so we could just go to the meeting and say, anybody know anything about this, or take it to them, and they would be sort of carrying it forward in that way and filling in holes and stuff.
That's neat.
And there was just all sorts of stuff going on provincially at the time. The Naturalist Club got all sorts of information because I came back from the board meetings and reported to them, and so they maybe got more than they really wanted to hear from me. But it, you know, Nancy Patterson's work with all of the wetlands and all the rest of it had connections, and we got involved in saving the Victoria Point bog.
And the community was supportive. That was,
So it wasn't directly connected with the Conservative, but it gave that public face to the whole naturalist thing and the attitudes about protecting stuff instead of just draining it and building on it.